I heard the fire before I ever saw it. A thin, hungry hiss in the cracks, a cough of smoke that clawed the throat like a thief breaking into the lungs. On the night of September 2nd, 1666, I was on watch near Pudding Lane. Narrow streets where the shops smelled of flour and spice, and the timber houses leaned together like neighbors who had forgotten where one wall ended and another began. My name is William Hook, a parish watchman, carrying a leather bucket over my shoulder, a long hook strapped to my back, and a lantern that weighed in my hand like a tiny sun. The east wind prowled through the lanes that night, rattling signs and tugging at shutters, as if the city itself were holding its breath before a nightmare. At first, it was only the smell. Scorched almonds, bitter smoke. Then came the sound. Not the friendly crackle of a hearth, but the snap of timbers breaking, sharp as bones. I turned the corner and saw it. Orange tongues bursting from Thomas Farriner's bakery, licking the night. The door was thrown wide, and inside glowed a furnace that had decided to escape its oven. Fire! I shouted, ringing the little bell on my belt, the one that served as our alarm. Faces appeared in windows, pale ovals in the dark. My fellow wardens rushed from the shadows, some in shirts, some still in their nightcaps, all with eyes round and white as moons. We formed a chain of buckets from the Thames, the river that rolled black and silent, as if doubting it had enough water to help us. Hooks, I ordered. The only way to stop a blaze in these tight wooden lanes was to pull down the houses around it. Destroy to save. We swung our long iron hooks into the beams, tugging, but the fire was quicker. The wind scattered sparks from roof to roof, and the beams went up like kindling soaked in pitch. The blaze did not run, it leapt like a predator. By dawn the fire had spread to nearby streets. Someone went to fetch the Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, and we waited, buckets sloshing, hoping for the one order that could make a difference. To use gunpowder to blow gaps in the city and stop the beast. When at last he arrived, yawning and puffed up with self-importance, he waved it off. "A woman might piss it out," he muttered. I remember those words as clearly as I remember the heat on my face. Some of us nearly dropped our buckets in fury. I told him, "Sir, the wind is no woman. Give us powder." But he only turned his back. The fire laughed at his arrogance. The wind opened the city like a book, and the flames read every line. We dragged out the fire engines, little more than wooden pumps on wheels, paraded proudly at fairs in quieter years. The jets they spat were thin, weak. Water struck the fire with a hiss like a cat spitting, and then vanished into steam. My hands blistered, my eyes streamed, but we passed the buckets faster, faster, shouting over the roar. By the second day, the blaze had eaten its way through Cheapside, leaping into warehouses and shops stuffed with tar, pitch, rope, oil, and wine. Flames sucked the barrels dry and spat them back as explosions. I ran through streets I had walked all my life, but they no longer looked like streets. They were glowing tunnels, lined with blackened doorways, filled with ash that stung the skin like nettles. "Where do we run?" a woman begged me, clutching her child. "To the river," I said. "Into boats if you can find one. Take only what you must." The Thames was choked with barges and skiffs, piled with bundles, chests, whole families huddled together. On the quays lay heaps of possessions: pots, carpets, books, cages with squawking chickens, all the pieces of houses scattered like dice. By the third day, we were no longer fighting a fire, but a sea of fire. It rolled westward, as if the city itself were a loaf of bread sliced by the knife of the wind. Great pillars of flame rose to the sky. Sparks swarmed like migrating birds, seeding new blazes wherever they fell. Roofs sagged, walls folded, whole houses crumpled in an instant, as if kneeling before the inferno. In the chaos, I met a young clerk, his face black with soot, clutching a notebook to his chest. "I'll go to the king," he gasped. "He must give the order, blow up the houses. Tell the men to hold on." He ran toward Whitehall with a courage that cut through the smoke. And soon enough, the king himself came, Charles, with his brother, the Duke of York. They did not stand apart, but strode among us, their faces grim. "Use the powder," they commanded. Tear down what you must. Save the rest. Relief ran through me like fresh water. We carried barrels of gunpowder through alleys, setting them in cellars, lighting fuses, and fleeing as the ground thundered. Houses burst apart in showers of timber and slate. People cursed us for destroying their homes, then thanked us when they saw the fire falter at the new-made gaps. It was arithmetic in flames. One house sacrificed to save 100. But the worst came when St. Paul's itself caught. The old cathedral, Gothic, vast, proud, its library filled with manuscripts, its stones black with centuries of prayer, burned like a torch. The lead roof melted and poured into the streets, rivers of glowing silver. The great timbers cracked and roared. The people who stood watching did not cross themselves. They only stared, hands clapped to mouths, as if God himself had left the city. When the roof fell, it was as though a mountain had collapsed, and sparks flew so high they seemed to mingle with the stars. As the fire spread, the panic among the people grew louder than the blaze itself. I saw carts overloaded with furniture and barrels stuck in the alleys, wheels breaking under the weight. Families quarreled in the smoke, screaming over what to carry: a cradle or a chest, a trunk of books or a sack of bread. Some abandoned their treasures mid-street, too heavy to drag, and I stumbled on silver candlesticks and velvet coats tossed aside like rubbish. On London Bridge, the crowd pressed so tightly that children were lifted above heads to keep them from suffocating. Some jumped into boats half-filled already, and the boats nearly overturned, men beating each other with oars to escape first. And yet, while some lost everything, others gained. I saw thieves darting through the smoke, slipping into abandoned shops, dragging out silks and coin. One man staggered past with 3 loaves of bread still steaming, stolen from a baker's shelf moments before it crumbled in fire. "You carrion!" someone shouted, and he fled. In chaos, law had fled with the mayor. Only fire ruled the streets, and its court allowed every crime. Still, we tried. On the second day, I remember forming a line near Cornhill. My shoulders ached from passing buckets until my arms shook. A woman beside me, her apron wet, hair clinging to her cheeks, did not stop even when blisters opened on her palms. "If we do not fight," she said, "we lose the church." She meant St. Michael's. But as we poured, the roof flared and fell, scattering sparks over us like rain. She dropped her bucket and fell to her knees, sobbing. I pulled her away before the flames swallowed her. There was no victory that day, only retreat. Nights were worse. The city glowed as bright as day, but the light was cruel. The fire made shadows dance huge upon the ruins, so that walls looked like giants staggering. People wandered half-mad, searching for relatives, calling names into the roar. I saw an old man kneeling in the street, clutching the charred frame of his violin. He touched its strings though they had melted, as if he could still draw out a song. We fought on without rest. I no longer knew day from night. The fire painted everything the same colors: orange, red, black. My voice was gone, so I gave orders with my hands: lift, pull, pass, run. The leather of my bucket softened with heat until it felt like old cloth. My palms were split and bleeding. Yet in every bucket chain, in every detachment of men and women, there was strength enough to keep going. Boys carrying small pails, women staggering with brimming tubs, sailors working the pumps, soldiers carrying powder. London, a city of merchants, learned in those days to share its muscle. On the 4th night, the wind at last tired. Perhaps heaven had relented. Perhaps the fire had gorged itself too well. But over the Thames fell a heavy, hot stillness. We lined up our powder blasts, hemming the blaze in with rubble. At dawn, the flames stumbled, coughed, and died into smoke. I sat on a pile of warm ash, too weary to lift my head. "Alive?" croaked John, a fellow watchman. "Still," I rasped back. My throat was cracked like burnt wood. When we walked the streets that remained, London looked like a book burned to cinders, its letters gone, its pages only smears of black. Ash drifted down like lazy snow. The air smelled of lime, resin, and charred flesh. People whispered numbers. 13,000 houses gone, 87 churches, halls, markets, warehouses. Officially few dead, but I knew better. Fire keeps its own records, hidden beneath the ruins. I returned to the place where my own house had stood. Nothing remained but a nail in the ash, one I had hammered into a beam only that spring. I picked it up and slipped it into my pocket, the only inheritance left to me. "William," someone called. "We need you still." Needed, that meant alive. Needed, that meant the work was not over. We began clearing rubble, setting up makeshift stalls, lighting new ovens. Bakers needed fresh loaves, and the first smell of bread after the fire was so gentle it made my eyes sting. The king promised new streets, wider and straighter, buildings of stone instead of timber. I believed him, or at least I wanted to. The city groaned, but it was not dead. In the ruins you could already hear hammers, steady as heartbeats. Even now, when I walk by Pudding Lane, I sometimes hear that first crack of timber, see that first sly tongue of flame. Could I have stopped it with a single bucket? I doubt it. Fire is not just flame. It is timber piled close, streets too narrow, leaders too slow to act, neighbors who do not trust each other until it is too late. We learned the hard way. Change the conditions and you change the fire. When people ask me about the Great Fire, I do not give them numbers. I give them sounds. The snap of thatch as it collapses, the cough of the pump, the thump of a powder blast, the slap of footsteps fleeing to boats, a child's mama, lost in the roar, and finally, a quieter sound, but the one that matters, the steady tap of hammers on new beams. I am a watchman, a fireman. My tools are simple: bucket, hook, pump, and a voice calling neighbors into a chain. But I have learned one more task, to be memory. For without memory, all our labor is water through a sieve. London burned, yes, but we endured. We built again. And as long as I breathe, I will carry the lesson. A city is not its houses, not its spires, not even its great cathedral. A city is its people, passing buckets hand to hand, hammering beams into place, whispering prayers in the ruins. If we hold fast to one another, no fire can truly erase us.